musician,
long-distance kayaker,
a businessman,
she looks after animals,
artist,
author.
We interview remarkable people.
They're talented in so many different areas.
You're listening to The Dialogue.
89.7 FM Eastside Radio.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Yvonne Englman, who is a Holocaust survivor. Yvonne, thank you so much for coming and having a chat to me.
It's my pleasure to be here.
You
can ask me anything you want, and I shall try to answer it to the best of my ability.
I have to say you look very beautiful today. I've commented on your gorgeous shoes and your gorgeous outfit, and you are in your 90s. We're not even going to give the definite. We don't even need to give them the definite age.
Yeah.
But you've lived a long and very interesting life.
Yes, I did. I made the most of it. After the war, I tried to lead a normal life and enjoy being alive and meeting people and talking to them.
So actually, you should be doing my job. You should be doing the interviewing, I think. You started life off in Czechoslovakia and as an only child.
Yeah.
You said you were very spoilt.
Yes, I'm an only child, an only grandchild. I had the most wonderful childhood anybody could wish for. Unfortunately, it was cut short when the war started.
So at the age of 10, you had business, your parents were in business, so you said you were comfortable.
Yeah.
You had a comfortable upbringing. At the age of 10, the war arrived, and suddenly your world started to shift to people that, were friends with you and were, happy to mix with you, suddenly weren't that interested in having you around or being around next to you.
No, they didn't. My school friends, which I sat just a week before next to them, I met them on the street. They completely ignored me. And even after all these years, I have never ever forgotten the terrible hurt. If you walked on the street, they could abuse you. They could call you all sorts of names. Everybody went past by and they didn't take any notice.
At the age of 10, you're at such a vulnerable stage in your life. Children at that age need friends. They need a whole lot of different things. You went from this happy childhood to suddenly being excluded, like there was something wrong with you.
Yes.
That must have been hard.
That is a very terrible feeling, to be excluded and not to acknowledge you, that who you are, or say a kind word to you. Nothing. Do you know that the biggest crime what the world has committed against humanity is to be silent? Because if they knew what's going on, and if they would have done something about it, it couldn't have go on like that.
So you said that your father was actually taken to the police station sometimes twice a week.
Yes, my dad used to be taken to the police station. He committed no crime whatsoever, the only crime that he was a Jew. And we never knew if he will come back. One day he returned home and he had his 2 front teeth knocked out. We were absolutely horrified what happened, but there was nothing we could do about it.
They then took your family and put you into a ghetto. Now, a ghetto, I asked you what a ghetto was, and you explained to me.
A ghetto it used to be a brick factory, so it was a huge room with concrete floors, and when we arrived there was straw on the floor, and that was our bedding. There were hundreds of people already there. The food and hygiene was terrible, and the uncertainty, we didn't know what will eventually happen to us. So we lived in fear and anxiety all the time.
You said that anxiety and that fear, you said, has carried you through your whole life. You still have that anxiety.
I still suffer with anxiety because the fear of not knowing what will eventually happen to us, it is a very, very terrible thing as a young girl to live with.
So you went from a beautiful home with your family into essentially a brick factory like cattle on straw with a whole lot of other families living around you. And you said there was nothing to do each day. You know, there was no activities. There was nothing to keep you occupied.
No, it didn't. That was another thing. We didn't know what to do. We used to try to talk to each other, think what's going on, but we had no contact with the outside world whatsoever.
Did you find other children to play with while you were there? I mean, was there a sense of at least, you know, children sort of mixing with one another, or were you just sort of stuck in your family area? And how did the community? Because it would have been a strange type of community.
Yes, it was people from which you didn't know, from all different backgrounds, but we tried to be nice to each other and talk to each other, particularly the adults and the children. We didn't know, we couldn't play any games, we had nothing, so we tried to pass the time the best we could manage.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Yvonne Englman, who is a Holocaust survivor. You had the stars sewn on you at that point.
Yes, we had the yellow star of David. We had to wear that. And that was also not a pleasant thing to have to be different than anybody else.
They came there and took you to the trains.
Yes, they came and did selections, and they taken so many people. They selected so many of us, and we were taken to the railway line. When we arrived there were dozens of cattle wagons, and we were marched into those cattle wagons, and they were locked, and we were traveling. None of us knew where we are going or what will eventually happen to us. After traveling for quite a few days, one day my father told me, "Look, I don't know where we are going, but we are not going for a holiday. I want you to promise me that you will survive." I really couldn't comprehend what that meant, but I said, of course I survived. And eventually we arrived to our destination, which was an extermination camp, Auschwitz, which is in Poland.
You travelled literally, you said, like sardines. You said there were so many people in the cattle trucks
Yes.
that you were literally stuck one next to one another, and you got food. The food you got was one tiny piece of bread. And to drink.
A cup of, it's supposed to be coffee, it was black water. And that was for the whole day while we were traveling.
So you were starving. You were starving. Starving. We couldn't have a wash. There was a bucket in the cattle wagon. We had no privacy, and everybody was just petrified. What will happen to us? Can you believe that any other human being can treat people like they treated you? It must have been amazing to understand that you were being treated as humans like that.
We were certainly not treated as humans. We were not even treated like you would treat an animal. But there was nothing we could do. We just had to accept it. We had no alternative.
Did anyone ever think of escaping? Was there talk of escape? Did people think about that, or were you so subdued and frightened that you didn't even think about
Well,
that?
I can only say for myself, my family never talked about it, and I certainly never gave it a thought, because you were. It was hard to imagine that you can be treated like that for no reason at all. You have committed no crime. So it's undescribable, even for myself today, what actually was happening.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Yvonne Englman, who is a Holocaust survivor. You were delivered to Auschwitz, and when you got off the cattle trucks, you went through a second selection process. What happened at that selection process?
When we arrived to Auschwitz, we were marched out from the wagons, and we had to stand in a row. I stood with my mom and dad, and my grandmother, my uncle, and there were dozens of SS. One particular one, Dr. Mengele, he had a baton in his hand. When he came to our row, he took my mom's hand away from mine, and they went to the left, and I went to the right. And that was the last time I have ever saw my parents or my grandmother, uncle. And my mother was 38 years old, and my father was 45 when they have been murdered. I went to the right. We arrived to an enormous hall. In that hall were dozens of SS. We had to strip our clothing, and they shaved our hair. Can you imagine a young girl standing in a hall surrounded by men and naked? And I don't know to this day what actually happened, but I was marched into the gas chambers. The gas chambers was a room. We had shower, but instead of the water, it was gas. We were locked up there all night. In the morning, we were marched out. The gas didn't work.
That's quite an extraordinary moment, a sliding door moment, when you were actually selected to die. So you're 14 and a half, and you've gone through the selection process. They've cut off your beautiful long red hair.
Yeah.
You said everybody looked exactly the same after they were stripped. It was almost like they dehumanized you completely.
Yes, it was such a shock that you really didn't know what's happening. It was an undescribable fear and shock. You were alone, but surrounded by total strangers. And as we were marched out from the gas chambers, we were taken to a washroom where you had to wash yourselves. We were not given a towel or any underwear, just a grey dress and a pair of wooden clogs.
Now, you stayed in Auschwitz until the war ended, but one of the jobs that you were given to do was to go through all the clothing and see what had been sewn into the clothing. Yeah. How did you land up having to do that?
Well, that's what they took us to work. They selected so many people to different works. I was selected with many others. We went to the same hall where we arrived. As everybody had to strip their clothing, there was bins all around in the room. We had to take every garment which was taken off and search it. Whatever you found in it, you had to put it in these bins. But while working there, you could hear children choking from the gas, adults screaming, and you could smell the burning of the human flesh. And also, you were in great fear that maybe you will be the next victim. Because in Auschwitz, the crematoriums worked for 24 hours a day. 6,000 people were gassed daily. So the uncertainty the hunger, we were lice infected, we had scurvy. You were in constant fear what will happen to you next.
How long were you there for?
I was there for a long time. And as the Allies were coming closer to Auschwitz, that's where I worked, we were sent on to death marches. We were not in any physical or mental state by that time. We were malnutrition. We were starving. If you found a piece of potato peel, that was something special. Nobody can understand what hunger really means till you have experienced it. Today, when I see what we waste, I cannot accept it. I will never throw out a tiny piece of bread. It doesn't matter how stale it is, because what I suffered, I can't do it. We had to march every day so many kilometers. If you couldn't keep up the march, you were taken aside on the street, and that was the end of you.
So you saw a lot of people die.
So a lot of people die. I saw a lot of human skeletons. What I have seen is something, it's hard to believe, even for myself.
Do you sometimes look at your world around you now and think it seems like a bad nightmare that maybe didn't happen to you, because your world is so different now? It's like living on different planets.
It is like living on a different planet, and it's hard. It's hard to really comprehend that what you went through only 72 years ago, and today you can walk on the street and you're not being abused. You are free. It is like a miracle which I have never ever thought I will lead a normal life.
When the Allies came and you were freed, what was that feeling like, that moment when you knew that all of a sudden you were actually free?
Well, you didn't understand it. It was hard to understand. We were liberated by the Russian army, and so did the Red Cross come, and they brought trays of bread with very thick butter. And of course, we haven't seen such food. Everybody went for it. So we have all got very sick. We have got dysentery. Our stomachs could not tolerate anything so rich. So we had to be hospitalized and regained some strength. And everybody was anxious to go back to the country they come from. The railway lines were bombed, so we had to go on foot, but we couldn't cover long distances. But on the road, there were soup kitchens set up. And you went in, you got a plate of soup and also blackboards where you put your name down with a hope if somebody should come through that particular city or village, that if you see some names you recognize. Eventually, I arrived to Prague. Unfortunately, in my case, I am the sole survivor of my family.
Wow. That is just quite the most amazing thing that you are the sole survivor, and also a sad thing that you are the sole survivor. Both of those things are equally as weighty. How did you get to Australia?
Well, the Jewish Welfare Society you could apply to come to Australia, to Sweden, to England and America. I had no idea where Australia is, but I decided I will apply because it's so far away. I wanted to get away as far as I could from Europe. But I was accepted to come to Australia, but there was no boat sailing so frequently as today. You can see all those luxury liners arriving daily, planes landing. So I was sent to Paris to a children's home to wait for a boat which was sailing to Australia.
And you're doing all of this on your own.
Completely,
Everything's on your own.
completely on my own, devastated. I lost everybody.
You lost everything. You didn't even have a thing. You had
I had nothing.
Not even a photo.
Not a photo, not a grave to go to. It is hard to imagine that what a human being can survive, and if you have got the will of going ahead to start a new life, takes a lot of courage. But I promised to my father and I kept the promise.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Yvonne Englman, who is a Holocaust survivor. What is it inside you as a person that makes you want to survive, that makes you go on every single day? Because this type of thing can kill you. It can crush your spirit.
Well, it has. I had that terrible strong feeling that there is a purpose that I have survived, and I have to be strong enough to try to start a new life, which I did. And it's very important to me that I have survived, that I can educate the young people, the public, to know what really was happening, that the 6 million, among them 1.5 million children, have not perished in vain, that we tell the world and perpetuate their memory. The only way we can do it is tell and educate the young people.
You say when you go and speak to the school children, sometimes it's very hard because children have no filter. They just ask everything and anything. And you said there have been times when you've actually found yourself crying with the children. What's that been like?
That is something I try not to do, but when I see the children cry and asking such questions that they have really listened what I spoke to, that is my reward. So as hard as it is, I try to answer them and try to tell them not to be afraid. If they think something is not right, to voice their opinion, to stand up, because that is so important.
You got married to a survivor as well.
I got married to a survivor, yes, and we came to Australia without anything. If you can imagine, absolutely nothing. It was a wonderful feeling to walk on the street. Nobody abused you. I couldn't speak one single word of English. We went to school. This is a country which gave me an opportunity to start a new life, put some roots down. So to be able to feel that you belong to this country, you must be able to communicate. Today, I have got 4 generations. I'm very happy here. I haven't lived anywhere as long as I lived in this country. I'm 69 years here, and I feel that this is my home. And I shall always be grateful for giving me this opportunity to do it.
You have children, you have grandchildren, you have great-grandchildren. You have made a huge family. You have recreated an incredible family and an incredible legacy. Do you feel that are you proud of the fact that you've actually taken this terrible experience, grabbed life, the life that you've been given, and actually created a future.
Well, I'm a very determined person and a very disciplined person. And this, I wanted to create a life, a legacy, and that Hitler has not achieved what he set out to do. Here I am with third generation.
It's pretty amazing. I think that's pretty. How many great-grandchildren have you got?
I have 12 great-grandchildren. One is 16, one is 15, and little ones.
That's so exciting. And that gives you joy. Do your
That gives me
great-grandchildren...
the biggest joy, because this is something which I have never ever dreamt that I will be able to have a family, and they are a wonderful family, wonderful loving people and decent people, and that, what to me, is the most important thing.
We've come to the end of the interview, and I'm so sad because I think I could probably ask you so many more questions, and I'm sure your life has been extraordinary in more ways than we've shared today. But I feel really touched that you have shared your journey with me. I have wanted to cry the whole way through this interview because I could never imagine living the life that you have. But thank you very, very much, Yvonne.
And thank you for having me, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you. You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show. We'll be back next week with another interview.